So there is a downdraft potential in America of the scale that nobody has truly seen.
Welcome back to Metals and Miners. I'm its founder and its host, Gary Bohm. Today we have a dynamic discussion lined up, and we are fortunate to have with us Francis Hunt, the market sniper. Francis is a trader with more than 30 years of experience. He's a technical analyst and educator, and he's also the creator of the HUNT Volatility Funnel Method, which is a unique trading methodology that is designed to put you in front of a major expansive move in the market. Francis, thank you so much for joining us today.
Gary, delighted to be with you, and thank you for asking me.
Yeah, so let's begin with the deficit spending situation. It's debt upon debt upon debt, and it seems to be the focus of government. Fiscal dominance, in other words, spending way beyond collected tax revenues. It seems as if the consequence is going to be and has been a steady and deliberate devaluation of the dollar. Is this sustainable, and what do you expect to happen next?
I love that you started there, because to me, this is almost the capstone of that pyramid in terms of understanding the whole nature of the game and where we are at. I literally, when people don't start there, drag the conversation there first. So thank you for that, because you're talking about the right things. And it starts from the top down, which is why I referenced it as a capstone almost. In essence, in a simply not seeking to be hyperbole or mega drama, we are in a debt-based collapse right now, and it is already unfolding. The mathematics, it's absolutely clear. There is no ability to continue in this current state for too much longer. It will end. All things that cannot continue will pass. And the debt-based fiat system is going to end. And I want to highlight to people that debt as asset class is the borrowing into existence of fiat. People often don't see the two things. They see, oh, there's forex markets, silo, and there's debt markets, separate silo, as if, you know, you can separate the two. Money is borrowed into existence. You've had a first quarter of the year with fairly dominant dollar, not super strong, but firmer than most, on account of faster up on rates at the tail end of last year going into this year, and higher and getting there quicker than other nations, which is why the UK actually had their pension crisis and a problem with their debt markets and the pound. Note how I say it affected their debt markets and the currency. And for that reason, you had reasonable dollar dominance, but there were other forces that were dimming that shining strength that wanted to be the dollar. And that was the bifurcation and all the other aspects about bilaterals in, Russia, China, India, Russia, et cetera, et cetera. So the de-dollarization topic. So you got a certain amount of dollar strength, but you didn't get overarching dollar strength. During that period, and from the year before, we've been covering the USD JPY as one of our key fear indicators, by the way. And that was a perennial portfolio trade. We even referred to it that everybody was borrowing long because of the differential in rates. Well, I'm sure you'll want to come back to that in a minute, because we've had a very violent fear trade risk off that's seen that come down very, very hard in the opposite direction. But your question was, is it sustainable? Short answer, absolutely not. It's mathematically impossible. And we're already in various stages of the collapse. And the first quarter was the debt that lost value from the high of 2020. Don't forget, we had rates that dropped on the 10-year to 0.3. They went up to, fives. That is a 45% loss in valuation on debt portfolios, which is why when people that are nationalistic of intent, sometimes I feel that a little bit with the dollar milkshake theory, guys, and they're talking about how strong the dollar is, they're actually bragging about their asset class of debt being the outperformer on losing value as well. So it's a seesaw. When your currency is strong, it's like two pressure valves on an expanding geyser. You choose which tap you try to release some of that pressure. And if you're getting strength in your currency, it's actually your debt that's taking the devaluation. If you're Japan and you try to hold your debt market up, it's the currency that takes the devaluation. So the couple of misconceptions in this debt-based failure that many people have, and I want to just dispel them. You've got to tie debt and currency together. They are not separate silos. Money is borrowed into existence. So when you talk about facts like Yellen generating deficit spending to the tune of $1 trillion, many people are repeating this every 100 days, that actually points to about 3.65 million at that rate for the year. You're talking about a massive expansion in debt that is not funded by taxpayers' take. And that all becomes a glut that gets moved onto debt asset as instruments. And I sometimes joke, if I've gotten 10 oil tankers full of pink Crocs, original style, and there's no scarcity in those. And once I've started to sell them through every, street merchant and every corner and every place, the price for those go down. Scarcity is part of what makes gold attractive. It's why Bitcoin has 21 million and no more. People understand proliferation does not point to high valuation. If everyone drove a Bugatti Veyron, they wouldn't be unique. They wouldn't be interesting. We've all seen them. We've all sat in them. It would be the VW Beetle for our times. So this is a key element. It's not only scarcity, uniqueness, properties, and other things obviously contribute to higher valuation. But one thing we do not have with debt is scarcity. And the overall parabola that is coming in terms of accelerating supply means that it's getting more available despite being abundantly available already. And the interesting part about this is we don't know to what extent the primary dealers, the banks, and I'm not just talking about US banks here, although I'm sure your audience is very strong US bias. I'm talking about European banks, etc. How many of them were actually exploiting the yen-based carry trade, which is something we've known about and spoken about for decades, because Japan is actually ahead of the curve on being over-indebted. They started in the 90s, we're post-COVID. Well, we were all already pretty over-indebted, but the chronic degree where we had low rates. Japan had very low rates long before the rest of the world. We were on 4s and 5s, and they were a sub 1. So the carry trade existence is not a new phenomenon, but I have a feeling a lot of new people to the market are just learning about it. And the question is, how deep is the offshore borrowing of yen because of that cheap trade? And don't forget, they won't get 0.25 if that's what it is today. There'll still be an intermediary, a bank, that will want to make margin, etc. And I've borrowed in yen before for property purchases, so I can tell you about that. I have practical experience. And what we're asking is how much of that is in there, and has the full yen trade, carry trade, unwound? And what we've seen, rather than the dollar milkshake theory and getting all the super strength in dollars, there's a shortage of offshore yen. If all the institutions, hedge funds, other speculating bodies, treasuries, etc. of the world have all been exploiting that, what you actually have is an unproliferated currency outside of its borders. They all have to hit the market bid to pay back as they get fear on asset devaluation. So we go risk off. And this is part of what we've just seen recently. So the debt is not sustainable. It is chronic. And it doesn't always mean dollar wins. We're seeing extreme fear, and our primary indicator is the carry trade. When people go risk off, you see the USD JPY sell off.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and several of those themes are going to be wound throughout our discussion today. Francis, I want to talk to you about the Fed and interest rates. Has the Fed waited too long to cut rates, and the U.S. economy is now headed for a recession as a result? And if so, how bad of a recession are you expecting based on your analysis?
That's a great question. And generally, central banks wait too long to cut rates. In fact, they're a lagging indicator. And usually the kind of matrices that they look for are inherently lagging indicators, kind of like unemployment as one. And recently you saw with a very disappointing non-farm payrolls number at the same time as Bank of Japan actually increased rates. So if you're a borrower in yen, your cost got up. And at the same time, that started a discussion about cuts having to come in. So that was the squeeze on the treasury's yield coming down potentially in the not too distant future, and the cost of borrowing going up. So that kills profitability, and that's why the unwind started. So to your question, are we in a recession? To me, we met the original criteria, which should never have changed for a recession, already once before, quite some time ago. So that meant you've already been once in a recession. Did we undo that? I don't know. I don't know what to believe. The reason given for it not being a recession and changing the rules was, no, you can't be in a recession when you have a red hot labor market. This was the words that Powell used, and I was absolutely astounded at this language. Subsequently, in the 9 months since he was making that reference to today, he seems more sanguine about non-farm payrolls as a number, and has said, well, it does have a tendency to overstate. There's a birth-death model, which is basically an add-in on an assumption, which is, I talk about sort of damn lies, complete deception, and then BLS labor statistics in that order of severity. So what's seeming to turn out is now he's toning down we wait for the data. Well, the data ain't good, and the mechanism for doing it, and I think they've orchestrated that. So then the question becomes, well, if they knew all that along, why did they say red hot then, and why are they walking it back now? And the key aspect, the real reason beneath all of that, in my opinion, is A, they didn't want to start cutting rates too soon. So again, I'm going to take you back to my seesaw, and I cover this in my Substack. I know you're going to be referencing yours. We've got great diagrams where we show.
I'm going to put up your Substack information here at the end of the video and in the description, and everybody who's watching will be able to link through and get direct access to your Substack.
Great, and thank you for that. I appreciate it. But I think there's very useful imagery there, because I put a seesaw of the treasuries and the dollar. And the concern now, and this is one of our primary calls that we've made, the highs of valuation in debt of 2020 brought about by the complete shutting down, certainly of small business global economy. Amazon was allowed to continue. A lot of other oligarchs actually mopped up and did quite well during that period, but most other businesses, medium and small, were shut down, and people's ability to earn was largely reneged. That is the single biggest demand-destroying event you could possibly orchestrate. You actually prevent people in small and medium enterprises from continuing to do productive labor as entrepreneurs, as workers, etc. And in that blow-off event, we had a blow-off high in valuation of debt, and we had that capitulation down to 0.3. It may even help to just show in a chart format, because I know a lot of men here, God bless the ladies in finance as well, but visualization helps. So I'll just, if you'll forgive me, I'll bring up your most common debt instrument, the US 10-year, and just show people that. That is typically in what we call technical analysis, a final capitulation. And this is an event that happens when a market truly just collapses. That was the rate collapse, which is actually the peak valuation. So you can see the March 2020 event right there of rate collapse. And I want to highlight, this has been a 40-year. So this is a monthly chart. This is Volcker era, where he turned the rates right up to 15%. So our primary thesis in all that we do is that this has been an incredibly long bull market that has been unrolling for 40 years. And in 2020, and this is the seminal key state. So just like you started on the debt question, which is where I say everyone needs to start, what people need to also understand is that the bond market bull that has buy the damn dip every time it sold off ended for us in 2020. So the proliferation, both to banks that bail out, people are unaware that 23 trillion was made away, far larger than the subprime. This is something media suppressed beautifully, and it's real hard even to find the original Zero Hedge article about the Fed providing loans to, including European, Swift Credit Suisse amongst them, as well as US-based banks. But 7 trillion did make it supposedly to the public, various quangos, political things, and also stimmy checks to the citizens. I think about 1.5 odd trillion maybe got to the citizenry. So we were heavily diluted, and that was a massive amount of money creation, which was also a huge creation of new debt, far larger than subprime. So this is why we say, that's it. This turn in rates, which is now heading up, that was your final capitulation. It's a trend change event. So going back to your question about Fed, because we're giving you long form answer here, why are they so behind the curve? Why did they hide behind bad labor stats for saying it's not a recession? They needed to keep rates higher because there isn't the bid on treasuries that they need for the treasuries to go up in value and the dollar down. There isn't that bid. There's not the same amount of attraction for buying, which is again why, how do you get your primary dealers like JP Morgan to then buy and be happy to hold your debt? Well, you help them facilitate the carry trade with the Japanese where they can borrow super cheap. If you can borrow at 0.1%, which was what it was before the rate hike, and there's a percent of margin to the facilitating intermediaries, for example, you're still borrowing at 1.1, you can put it in a treasury at 5% and take your tax. Now, of course, the incentive for those banks to hold treasuries is again being reduced. We know we're seeing China walk away from treasuries towards gold. They are divesting. You've bifurcated the planet. So the question is this then incompetence or is it by intent? And my conclusion is this is by intent. So we are slowly, steadily walking and fitting the explosives on all the supporting columns of the US economy, the debt system, by proliferating immensely, by bringing in immigrants that we are spending money and putting on hotels and doing all sorts of things and putting it on our tab, This is all extra debt that will have extra amounts of interest, and it will be extra power to the detonation that will take those supporting columns. So this is a controlled demolition of the Western system. And that's why I treat it very seriously. And that's why I say to many people, you may want to even consider where you see this out. It is deadly severe what is going on.
So let's just say that conclusion is 100% accurate. Why are they taking a sledgehammer to the economy? And what's going to replace it?
So one of the key things that is very beneficial to the high net worth billionaire class is to borrow cheap and purchase physical assets. Once you've done that, how do you become ever richer? You create an environment where you devalue your borrowing. So if you borrowed $1 million 30 years ago, that would have been a considerable sum. Having borrowed $1 million today, well, many people have homes worth $3 or $4 million, and that might not even represent 25% of the value of a pretty nice, let's say, executive home in a good area in a number of states in America. You and I were on a great boat trip down the river recently, and I'm pretty sure most of those homes you might not have been able to secure at all with your $1 million, while 30 years ago that would have been absurd. So the value to the billionaire classes, inflation is enrichment. Their debt gets devalued by the loss of buying power of the dollar. Remember, they have special relationships with bank and get to borrow cheaply, or they're in the carry trade. And the asset, when you create inflation, holds value in real terms due to the inflation. So if it's plant, property, even productive farmland, and we're aware that Bill Gates and other people potentially, supposedly, are acquiring such productive assets, they are going up. And I saw this in the UK with farmland. I remember when it was £1,000 an acre 20 years ago, and now it's like 5, 6, 7, 8. So what you're actually getting is assets that you own will go up in value, and what you borrowed will get devalued. So a high inflation environment is very beneficial to the high net worth class with cheap borrowing and physical assets and or equities. Even if you bought shares in the Mag 7 10 years ago, you would have had a fabulous compounded, probably at least 15% a year, possibly more. Which could mean, you know, in 10 years, you could have doubled your money or even more thereof. So this is an incredibly enriching for the high end. And what does it do for the normal middle class and the working poor, or the working classes and then the working poor? It's a poverty inducing. So it's my overall opinion is we are pushing all the chips. We're tipping the table to a high net worth wealth class that are often politically connected in the military industrial complex, Dark State, pharma, certain industries, C-suite, etc. An enrichment process where the middle is getting hollowed out and all being palmed into the working poor. So that extremely wealthy class has multiple jurisdictions, has very tax efficient, very good tax advice, unlikely to be paying the marginal tax rate that, say, somebody who works a job and is a fairly skilled person, let's say IT, earning 250,000 a year, he's still going to face the full whack of his personal tax in the States and other state tax. So it's a hollowing out process to the wealth and then the rest, and we're losing our middle.
But isn't there a great risk to bringing down the entire economy by running this type of playbook?
There certainly is, because America is set up very much as a consumer-based society, and this is why we are more concerned for retail consumer stocks and various other things, and even energies, because I know you'll probably want to mention oil and other things in due course. So the overall consumption actually is the base of the pyramid, your working classes, your blue collar, and then your middle classes and even your upper middle. That's consumer for most products. And what we're going to be seeing is, well, you're the guys that are causing the global warming. Your cheap Southwestern Airlines are the guys, you know, that are your $25 flight with, you know, to hop 1 hour and a half. All these things need to go. So we're seeing a lifestyle of great excess. We're going to see a two-tier system. We're already having two-tier justice in the UK, for example, you know, where, you know, everyone who is complaining about immigrants is a racist and is locked up, even for sharing a Facebook post, and other people that potentially have a different ethnicity or profile and are walking around with lead pipes are, well, leave them alone, don't intimidate them, etc. So there is a two-tier system being developed, very clearly to me, in my opinion, on my take here.
Fair enough. All right, let's go back to the markets for a second. In mid-July, U.S. stock market valuations hit the steepest extreme in U.S. financial history. The current level of market valuation in itself doesn't place any constraints on further speculation. However, it does show that we are in a historic bubble comparable to 1929, 2000, and 2022. From a technical analysis perspective, what's your take on that, and where do you see the markets going over the next 6 to 12 months?
That's a very good question. And I want to highlight there's two forces working at play. When you're in stagnation, which is where we are, the stagflation part, you are seeing the consumer and the retail side getting hurt. When you are in the inflation part, which is the devaluation of money, and you have an asset that you can purchase that sells product A that everybody needs, it's a $10 product today, but because of inflation, it'll be a $25 product in 5 years' time. Its input costs would have gone proportionately up. Its upside charge has gone up 2.5 times, its earnings and its dividends will also typically, whilst retaining, assuming it's not overperforming or underperforming, will also retain that same proportionality. So the earnings and the dividends might be 2.5 times in 5 years' time as well. So what it tends to do is it tends to be an asset category that is designed by virtue of the fact that it delivers future income streams via dividends and earnings, will retain value or to a degree, at least. It won't always be a perfect hedge, will retain value to a degree in an inflationary environment. That means the stock price could have gone up 2.5 times, but the share has actually, in terms of a real stable measure, has actually not gained market share, has not expanded margins, not done anything, just held its place. In all matrices, you can still have a market moving up on that. And that is a little bit about what we're having.
But you wouldn't have in that, I'm sorry to interrupt. In that scenario, though, you're not going to have the type of growth that we've experienced, looking at the right side of the line since 2022 up, you wouldn't see that type of growth with valuations that high, right?
Well, if you're talking retail and consumer stocks, particularly, for example, this would probably point to either them underperforming a little bit, so not being a perfect inflation hedge, but partly, or you're going to talk about PE multiple expansion. Their earnings are going to battle to go up because you're going to be getting a consumer that's ever more crushed, whose performance is less and less. The ideal stocks are those that are serving the stratosphere class, that are in the centimillionaire, billionaire classes, who will be largely unaffected by the fact that the cost of bread might go up 3 times, that cocoa has gone up 2 or 3 times, 4 times, and that coffee's gone up, because they've got the cheap money, they've borrowed and they've bought lots of physical assets that are going up immensely, and they've done it with leverage, and they're exceedingly rich. So if you've got a consumer, you either want other corporations, B2B, or the luxury brands, which is, the LVMH and all of these aspects, and again, selling, auto vehicles and supreme high net worth homes. Those things will typically be served. So when choosing stocks, know who your market is. If it's the blue collar worker, I would expect contraction. If you are Costco or Lidl, you might gain market share at the expense of Whole Foods and other type more.
And to your point, Home Depot, Walgreens, McDonald's, Big Lots, they've all contracted and done so, immensely.
Indeed. And actually, people think food is defensive. In actual fact, in downturns, people do eat less. So it's not 100% hedge. The best defensive industries are often utility companies, typically, but I would argue in this environment, we've continued to make this the case for what I call the hold your nose portfolio, and that's the military industrial complex. The status supported Mag 7 could continue to go up quite some way. And even I've got the SPY, by the way, technically up, because you were asking about general equity. So I thought the SPY might be one of your proxies. I'm happy to bring the NASDAQ. But this yen trade panic, if you have a look at this, this is a major hammer. You had a bit of a shooting star. I'll expand this a little bit so that everyone can see where we're walking and talking. But you had a little bit of a shooting star. There was a warning that there was a bit of pushback on those recent highs. You've done a lot since the lows here. But in actual fact, we've had the yen carry trade unwind. We've had a lot of risk off. You ran right the way down here. And largely, we've retraced all of that back. So actually, it's quite feasible you'll finish the end of this year higher than you are now. And we're in August. But that doesn't mean healthy economy. It just means devaluation of money is extreme right now and is actually doing so much in the devaluation space based on the borrowing and the trillion. Remember, every time she creates a trillion every 100 days, that's new money released into the system. So this is a liquidity surge. I don't think it's being well spent, but it's still money into the system. Even if you're paying people to dig holes and another team of people to fill in holes, they still get paid and they go home and have a paycheck where they might have not have had before, even though the output is of very little use. So you will end up seeing quite possibly that markets continue to go up. This is the most hated bull market in a sense for people that are not in it, because they can't understand why it's going up. They feel pain. They want to be short. They want to see everything align with what they are actually seeing. And what they're seeing is this weird divergence. And the thing that continues to drive it is the market is not driven by the man in the street. It's driven by the billionaire class. The main equities are held by them. The only time I listen is when Warren Buffett is selling, which he did just before this yen trade narrative. He would be concerned about valuations, but he's been concerned about valuations for a very long time. In short, we've had a financial leveraging up of the entire system. This is why, for particularly my American friends, and it's not a positive message, but it's one I think you need to hear, there is an eventual unwinding of this uniqueness of America. Many people seize it with national pride. We're awesome. And there is a bit of that. I love Americans. I love the American people. But let me say to you, a stock software company in Tokyo can be just as good and as well run as one that's born in a Californian garage and turned into a unicorn. These unicorns can be supplanted and relisted elsewhere. You have companies like BlackRock that are essentially floating zeppelins that can hoover up assets in many countries and are already doing that. I saw in South Africa, South African breweries, the mines, all of them take out new listings in London during the period of the Nelson Mandela coming in, and that asset class and those asset ownership migrates suddenly to their dual listing, which eventually became their main listings in London. So there is a downdraft potential in America of the scale that nobody has truly seen.
So that is exactly where I want to go real quick. So on this chart, 2020, we see a 4-year cycle low. A lot of people talk about every 4 years or so, there is a cycle low. And the last one came around the pandemic, 2020. So I hear people, I see people talking about there's a 4-year cycle low. It's coming. Yeah, right there. It's coming. There is we're right in the historical timeline for it. We've seen this massive explosion going higher with a brief interruption in 2022, and then it resumed again, and now it's at all-time highs. Do you anticipate a 4-year cycle low in the broader market to occur coming up soon, and one that would bring down in its vortex everything, including gold, silver, the miners, literally everything?
It's very interesting that you bring up the 4-year cycle, because Bitcoin's halvening cycle is synchronized on that and is very reliant as a crypto on the proliferation of quantitative easing to drive it higher. You have the US election cycle, which we are obviously in a very important year coming in. It is my assessment, to avoid reputation tarnishing, they tend to very close to the end of a final year of one president's bring out a bunch of bad news and weigh things down, so that it's kind of the incumbent gets to buy out and leave a mess for the next guy, and the next guy gets a chance to say, hey, this wasn't all on my watch, I've got to clean his mess. So it's quite common that happens. You had George Bush actually pick up the 2007-08 crash. You had many instances like that, and it's often on the right that they come in and harvest what happened on the left side. But you could argue Obama had to pick up a fair amount of difficulty from, again, the double presidency of George Bush Jr. But the 4-year is indeed interesting. But if you're talking just equity valuations, I am actually from this particular technical position. I was showing you these two. You can see I've log scaled now, which is a percent now. Instead of absolute terms, I've log scaled it. This in due course will look like small beer events. You did also mention you'd like to see the VIX, and I will show you that despite the VIX spiking to levels only seen by 2008 and CB19 events, that it's substantially coming back down. So this is looking like a nice short wet slap in the face, and that's it. There's no further brawling. We've had our attitude adjustment. We've taken it like a man, and it's back to the usual. So I could actually see the equity market still doing quite well. Remember the inflation, and it's confounding and it's frustrating. That's not to say it's value, and it represents value. In the macro, I see a broad scale in the reset, down valuation of America, but that goes with the debt collapse contraction. And until we get a spike in rates that causes the deflation on the debt, which may drive the dollar for a spell strong, and then eventually we get the seesaw breaking completely on the dollar hegemony and the debt. And that's when the asset classes in the US could get a very violent re-rating. It is again important to say that I speak of a two-tier society, the ultra wealthy and the rest of us. And you also have a little bit of that in the stocks, because when you look at some of these indices, excluding the Magnificent Seven, you have a two-tier society there as well, in terms of their relative performance.
So you've brought up gold a few times here in this discussion, Francis. The other day, gold moved more than 50 to 60 bucks and traded within an average day's range of all-time highs. And it did that without so much as a sleepy nod of recognition from the world, like it's a ghost or something. Why doesn't the world yet see gold as it assuredly will in the coming years? And what do you see as the catalyst to get the investing public to once again be paying attention to the importance and foundational need for gold?
Yeah, such a good question. You know, there is nobody who enjoys the product of gold winning out. There's nobody, for example, there's no, I've got to be careful. There's nobody marketing water, fresh water. You know, there might be brands maybe that are doing bottled water that'll say theirs is sourced from the best place, but there's no product for it. And it is the absolute essence of our existence and life. Nobody says, hey, tap water, filtered, awesome. You know, it's all about the packaging, or there's been sourced better or has more minerals. If there is any water advertising, it's not enough of a margin business, but there's plenty advertising for Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and all the others. And those are the fiat products that actually what you need is the hydration. And the rest is all the poison and the sugars and the chemicals to replace the sugars that we've now saying the sugar's bad, and now we make it worse with some other chemical compound. And it's absolutely right. And as I say, a lot of people that are putting out information on the dollar milkshake and how the dollar is going to have the spike if the interest rates suddenly climb faster. We've already had a little bit of that. It didn't spike particularly, but it was firm in the first quarter. And I just go, but your theory says gold wins in the end. And I'm saying that's not even true. It's winning now. It's winning right now. You don't have to wait till the end. The real winner of this race is gold, and it's winning now. And I've kind of reverted. Apologies for that chart. Let me just bring this up. I was funny enough writing about exactly this and doing some imagery. So if you can see that, since 2000, when you're around $245, you've gone up 10x in 24 years, and we've not yet been allowed to have the full play out of this. This is the constrained part. This is when, you know, I'm taking Usain Bolt out for a run, but I'm not allowing him to sprint yet. I'm just driving in the car and say, you know, alongside him, and he's got to walk up and warm up and, you know, stretch his arms and get his legs going. And I'm just doing 10 kilometers an hour. And he's going to get his run, and I'm filming it. And now I'm now shifting for second gear and say, okay, you're good and warm. Let's get you, start showing us, stretch those limbs for me a little bit. So this is where we're at in gold. And some people will also ask about silver in relation to this. And I say, for now, the God market, which I call the God market of anti-fiats, is gold. And the king fiat is dollar. So this is the, and we've already discussed about relatively how the dollar was strong the first part of this year, until this unwinding on the yen trade saw it sell off badly. But this is a 10x in 24 years, and we haven't really broken into a jog yet. We're just doing a fast limbering walk with a little bit of arm stretching, and we've got Usain Bolt ready doing this, and he's still ready to set a new world record and do 9.69 or whatever it is for the 100 meters. You ain't getting to see the interesting bit where he shows us what he can do, and that's King Gold. So first of all, against any fiat, gold is overperforming. In short, save in gold ounces. And to that question, people say, well, when gold really runs, silver will outperform. Do not move into any of the other precious metals too soon. This is a long game. So when the God market stands up and moves, the king warrior gets out of his throne, the other soldiers start dusting off their equipment and getting ready. They come in and they fall behind him in due course. But he first walks out the door. He surveys the land.
Has he not gotten up out of his king's chair yet?
He's barely dusting off his boots and standing up.
Okay.
He hasn't even wandered out of his chambers yet before all the others follow. So there is a stirring, most definitely. The process has begun, but this 10 in 24 years, I think we can do 10x in a far lesser time frame than that. Fractions thereof potentially. The parabola is coming. So this is true, and the gold is moving, and gold is money. The old, the old sayings are all going to come running home. It's not digital. We've seen Iran's just been hacked after being attacked. Anything that's digital is open to all forms of DDoS attacks, and you can talk to the tech guys and the hackers and all of this.
Well, that just happened
held by you is the safest thing for the average man.
Yeah. All right. So let me ask you this question about the mining stocks. As the price of gold stays at these elevated levels, it's proven it broke out of that 2000, 2100 level. It has not looked back. It may come back and test, but it has stayed the course. It seems to have beaten back 2000, 2100, 2200, 2300, 2400. It's now battling at 2,500. But as the price of gold stays at these elevated levels and higher, the repricing in the mining sector seems to be an inevitable development. There's been some positive movement recently for some of the miners as earnings have been announced. But based on your technical analysis, what is your expectation for the miners over, say, the next 12 months? I just want to point everyone over to our Substack. It is free. Go to metalsandminers.substack.com. We post free content on the consumer, economy, markets, metals, miners, artificial intelligence, and every single expert interview that we conduct. It's all up there. And when you subscribe, we want to give you a free gift. It's a report that we wrote. It's based on the important Ray Dalio foundational premise. It's titled, "If You Don't Own Gold, You Know Neither History nor Economics." This free gift, it's a must read for everyone on why we all should own gold. So head over to metalsandminers.substack.com, put in your email address to subscribe and receive the free gift on us. Also, I'm positive that you've enjoyed the conversation with Francis as much as I have. Please let him know. Hit the like and subscribe button and leave a comment below the video.